Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. As we celebrate Labor Day this week, we're looking at the kinds of labor that were important in Bible times and which were the occupations of most people. But we're also thinking about and exploring how, no matter what our occupations are, God has given each person a vocation as well. What this means is that we all have a calling to do what we do, and that we should do it in service to others and to God's glory. Today, our focus is on what may be the most important occupation of Bible times, and the jobs that involve the most people and the most time: food production. Let's start with farmers. Things were different in those days. Nowadays, we have tractors and combines and modern systems of irrigation, but none of those things were available in Bible times. In addition, the yields that we get from crops today are much more than what they were able to get. So farming was hard work. People survived on their flocks and what they could grow. The primary crop was wheat, which they harvested and then took to the threshing floor to beat and then separate using a winnowing fork. The wheat would be tossed into the air and the chaff would be blown to the side while the wheat fell to the ground to be collected and turned into bread. In the book of Ruth, it describes Ruth beating out her wheat, and John the Baptist says Jesus is coming with his winnowing fork to separate the sinners from God's people. Jesus spoke about farmers often and told many parables using farmers. There were stories about different kinds of soils and mustard seeds and weeds and wheat growing together. Farmers didn't plow furrows like we do today, but rather broke up the ground and then simply scattered the seed all over and covered it. It's hard to overestimate the role of farmers in that society. The other key food supplier were fishermen. Israel has two main bodies of water, the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. Nothing can live in the Dead Sea, it's too salty. But the Sea of Galilee was fresh water, and fish abounded there. Peter and Andrew and James and John were disciples of Christ who were fishermen, and there may have been others. There are references in the Bible to fishing with hooks, harpoons, and with nets, and you probably remember that when Jesus called some of his disciples, they were mending their nets where they had torn. There are several stories about fishing. One that comes to mind quickly is the miraculous catch they got when Jesus told them to let their nets down on the other side of the boat. And after the resurrection, while they were waiting to find out what to do to receive the Holy Spirit, Peter and the others went to Galilee to go fishing. Like wheat, fish was a main part of the diet in Bible times. The vinedresser was more important than you might think. Water was a valuable commodity in that day, and yet over time stored water could go bad. But wine didn't. The wine they drank wasn't like the wine we have today. It was typically white wine and apparently tasted a bit like vinegar, but it was a way to keep and have liquid. The vines were kept year after year, often with a wall around the vineyard and a watchtower in the middle so the owner could keep watch to protect against thieves during the time of harvest. The grapes were trod on and the juice collected to make the wine. Jesus turned water into wine, and of course, wine was a central part of the Last Supper. We usually use red wine when we celebrate communion to remind us more closely of the color of Jesus' blood. Finally, today we want to consider the shepherd. You know that shepherds and sheep are mentioned all over the Bible, indicating how necessary this occupation was. Sheep provided wool for cloth and meat on occasion to eat. Typically, shepherds were fairly low-class individuals with little or no education. It doesn't take much to lead a flock to a field and then sit there all day. But yet, the care a good shepherd had for the sheep is likened to the care God has for us. And for many of us, the 23rd Psalm is among our favorites. These people focused on food production and were the backbone of that society, feeding their own families and then others too, allowing those others to focus on other things. In that way, they were serving others and glorifying God, like we should. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.